Our studio guest is the mayor of Twin Falls, Idaho, Don Hall, joining us this segment of the program, and he's here with us every few weeks or so in that rotation that they have over at City Hall. And your number came up because a couple of people who are running for re-election on the council basically have decided they got to pull themselves off the air for a few months. Although, a lot of these races, I'll put it this way, really, I think that rule only applies about 60 days out, and there's not really a rule any longer. Ronald Reagan got rid of that rule back in 1987, I believe.
Oh, wow. See, I wasn't aware of that. I know that we always pull ourselves out of the rotation when we file, when we
Right,
do the
right,
official filing.
right. And if you've got an election coming up soon, I think that's probably a
Yeah,
wise
it's
choice
probably
to
the
make.
right thing to do.
But on the other hand, we'll make time for people, and if they've got an opponent or two, we'll do that. That's not going to be a serious issue. But you don't even have a race coming up until next May, and so I was saying the other day to somebody in the office, I said, "All right, we'll consider something along those lines in March," because no one is going to be thinking about any elections
No.
before that.
And then, of course, next year is going to be kind of a different year because the actual national primary is going to be in March.
Right.
And then the local primary is going to be in May, which
will confuse people.
it will confuse. I mean, it confuses me.
but actually, I think it's better in the long run. I brought this up to Steve Millington yesterday. I think it's better for local candidates because a lot of people will be thinking presidential primary, and they'll go in, and if you were also on the ballot, they'd be bullet voting, and you may not get many votes in a local primary
Yeah,
race.
yeah, yeah. I think there's a bunch of different ways to look at it. It is what it is, so we're just gonna deal with it. So
You are a candidate for county council. Or
I have announced
commissioner.
that I intend to run for county commissioner. There's no filing period at this point, so there's nothing official out there. But I intend to run for county commissioner.
It's not much of a different change in address. It's a few blocks away, but there's a different sort of responsibility in each job.
Well, there is, and it's in some respects it's more complex. Some respects not as complex. County commissioners, the county has a bunch of different elected officials, and each one of those are answerable to the public, and each one of those have their own specialties within the county. The prosecutor, the coroner, the sheriff, and on and on. And so that's going to be different for me because, and I think that's where I have a strength. I like to build consensus and work with folks and come to common goals. The city is different in the respect that we have a commission or a city council that we are more like a board of directors than we had a city manager that runs the day-to-day operations.
Mm-hmm. And in a three-person sort of government, as the commissioners are,
Mm-hmm.
it's a totally different responsibility that you get out of that. But it's also you run countywide though as well, right?
You
don't have
you do.
districts?
So you have to live within a district that you intend to run for. So I live within District 2. That's mainly encompasses most of City of Twin Falls. However, there's some outlying areas that are in 1 and 2,
Sure.
or excuse me, 1 and 3. But it's mainly in the city area. But the whole county votes for all 3 seats.
And I was going to say it's similar to in back east they have these big unwieldy things called county legislatures comprised of sometimes 25 people.
Wow.
And I've seen that happen and how that government works, and it can be a slow process. You get out to about the Mississippi River. I think in Missouri they're called county judges, but they're commissioners, and it's usually a 3-member board, and that gives you 3 different schools of thought sometimes on
Right.
any issue. But it doesn't. You also don't vest that power in just one individual. I guess that's the idea that it has to be a little diffuse.
Yeah, I think it needs to be. I think that we need to have different perspectives, and I like the idea of having 3 districts in the Twin Falls County because you have an east end, a west end, and a central. Essentially, is what you have, and of course, each of those areas have some different nuances to them, and so you, as a county commissioner, you serve the whole county, you represent the whole county, but you might have a perspective because of where you live that you can bring to the table when decisions are being made.
Our guest is Mayor Don Hall, joining us from Twin Falls this morning. It's 9:11, and we'll call it 60. Bill Colley with you, too, as well, on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. First time I met you, we were talking about wastewater and management. We were having a cup of coffee, and we had a conversation about that, and you said it was one of those things because of once you got elected, you really had to delve into and learn about.
Yes.
But then you become somewhat, you get some expertise at it. And we were just talking during the news break that you had experience with that just a few days ago.
We did. We took a tour of the wastewater treatment plant, and of course, folks know that we passed a bond. The citizens passed a bond a while back to improve not only the wastewater treatment but also the collection lines that come to it, because we were really pushing on the edge of capacity. And if we're going to be a sustainable growth community, we have to have some capacity down at the wastewater treatment plant. So the voters overwhelmingly passed the bond, and so we got a tour of the new stuff down there. And I'm not an expert. It's fascinating, really. And we were joking the first time that we met that I said, 20 years ago, if you would have asked me, I know anything about a sewer treatment plant, I would have said, why would I ever? But as a elected official, when you're charged with making sure the budget and these things are being met for the community, I mean, it's an important deal.
Yeah, I was going to say we had a conversation too with Dr. Tripp just before he left the building, and that centered on how fast the city is growing and some of those projections. And I said, I don't think we could ever get to 125,000. And you said, you know what? Maybe. And so all of these infrastructure issues are going to be with us for a long, long time.
Well, they are, and prior to the Chobanis and the Cliff Bars and those kind of events, we already had folks. We were looking at studies talking about the whole Snake River Plain where we live, and we're in the middle of that, of course,
Right.
stretching all the way from Idaho Falls or above and all the way over to the Oregon border. And the projections of this plain growing in the next, few decades. I mean, there's going to be growth here, and we need to be able to plan for that.
I was going to say, it looks like if you look at a map, it looks like a giant fishhook.
It does.
But since the weather here is somewhat temperate, that seems to be attracting a great many people.
Well, that's attracting people, but what we're also finding with folks today is folks are looking for a place to live, moving there, and then looking for a job. It's a new generation. And so Southern Idaho has beautiful amenities here. I mean, look at our canyon. Look at the fishing and the hunting and the recreational. From there's a term from mile to mile. You can run the river. You can do all kinds of things here. And so we're very, very blessed, and people see that and want to be part of that.
And so people will have to understand as taxpayers and the like that we will need more streets, we will need more sewer lines and water lines, and all of those things are going to be part of life. And you know what? It might be disruptive at sometimes because of construction going on.
Well, any time that you do construction, it's going to be disruptive. And we went through a season of that a few years ago when I think we had parts of Eastland and Washington torn up at the same time, two of the arteries going through our town, and it's painful. And I think we also at that time we had Falls torn up as well, Falls West. But it's just a sign of the times and the growth, and we're trying to keep up on those infrastructure issues, and because you can't let them deteriorate. If you do, it's way more expensive to deal with.
And this, of course, is going to impact the county as well because the city just doesn't grow and stop at the city line. People are going to say, well, I like this house just across the line toward Kimberly. And so all of this has got to be integrated at some point.
Well, it does, and there needs to be great communication between the cities of the county here, all of them, Filer, Murtaugh, Hanson, Twin Falls, all of the cities that are here, and the county, and discuss how we want to see these things grow. And the county needs to have a seat at those tables in the area of impact and those kind of things.
Very quickly, since we're coming up near the break here, and I know we've talked about this already, and it's I've talked to everybody who's been in elective office about the refugee resettlement program. But you were at the meeting yesterday, the pre-meeting of the luncheon.
I was,
and so a lot of you got a chance to get some questions answered there, and then there was the big meeting last night. Are you satisfied that these people know what they're doing?
I am. I think they know what they're doing. They gave us information. They answered any question that we asked them. They really gave us some insight about how the process works and the facts of how it works. Because we hear all these rumors and they're like, and they were real. They said, yeah, we cannot. They can't guarantee. And life is risky. Okay, bringing folks here from other places is risky. But they are trying to mitigate that with as much intelligence and investigation as they can do on their part. I was satisfied with the meeting. I was very, very pleased that we had that level of folks from Washington D.C. coming to our a small little town here, Twin Falls, and sharing with the folks their perspective and the process.
Suzanne Hawkins was here a few weeks ago, and of course, you're a former law enforcer. She said most of the people who she's talked to on the local level who have concerns about how it's going to impact their job, for instance, are in law enforcement because they deal with all the first responses if there's going to be any trouble. Are you getting some of that feedback from people you used to work with who still wear badges?
I'm not getting much from law enforcement themselves. Obviously, they're always involved in that. I'm getting that from citizens worried about our law enforcement officers. And the potential harm or potential issues that they might have to deal with if the worst case scenario happens, but not so much from the law enforcement officers. So my perspective is different.
And I hope that what we saw, law enforcement already had its issues with certain organizations in this country this summer, but maybe that's finally subsiding and maybe things will start to, reach equilibrium again.
Well, I am a true believer. I want to listen to all sides of any issue, this one included. I'll sit down with anyone. I've talked to people on both sides of this issue and listen to their concerns. And they, I think where we devolve into name calling and on either side, I've heard it from both sides. I think that that's not productive. I think that everyone has a seat at the table and their voice needs to be heard, and I'm willing to do that.
And the debate we've had on this, going back, gosh, since March or April, I mean, I would guess that everyone has pretty much made their viewpoint clear. And I don't know how much more debate we can have. I guess it'll be ongoing, though.
Well, I think last night was, for me personally, I had some questions answered. Certainly, I've shared with you before my perspective because of the people that I come in contact with. I always try to bring it down to the human element. The folks that I have come in contact that have gone through the refugee program or are going through it have been kind, productive, caring human beings. Okay, they're human beings, and so I support them. But I did have some questions answered last night, and I hope that others listened. There's going to be folks that on either side of this equation that will not react to facts. They're so emotionally charged, or their perspective is so different that they don't believe our federal government. And I certainly understand some of that perspective because I was interviewed by a New York Times reporter yesterday, and I shared with him. He asked me why, after 30 years of this uh, um, organization being here and refugees coming here, why is it all of a sudden now? And I guess I waxed a little philosophically. I think locally we're feeling a little disenfranchised, that our voice isn't being heard in Washington D.C. I'm not saying about our representatives. I think that they do. But I'm saying the current administration that maybe we're not being listened to. And you can see that with some of the decisions that
Sure.
are certainly not popular.
Want to thank Mayor Don Hall for coming by this morning. We'll see you again in a few weeks because, as we said, this is a shorter rotation
Yes.
with members coming
Yes.
by from City Hall.
Well, I look forward to coming by, and I appreciate the time on the air with the citizens.
All right. I want to point out, coming up in just a few minutes on the program, a couple of thoughts about the visit to the U.S. by Pope Francis.